When we think of healthy soil today, compost piles immediately come to mind. Turning scraps into black, crumbly humus has become the cornerstone of modern organic gardening. But here's a thought that often gets overlooked. 2 centuries ago, most small farmers and homesteaders didn't have the neat bins, tumblers, or layered piles we're used to seeing in every backyard. Yet their soils stayed fertile enough to keep families fed for generations. The question is, how did they do it? How did farmers in the 1800s and earlier keep soil alive and thriving without what we consider the backbone of regenerative gardening today? The answers reveal practices that were simple, direct, and surprisingly effective. They relied less on heaps of compost, and more on understanding how nature cycles organic matter in place. Within minutes, you'll see that these forgotten approaches hold powerful lessons for anyone trying to restore soil fertility now, especially if you don't have the time, space, or patience for managing a pile. For farmers 200 years ago, nothing left the land for long. Household waste, animal bedding, plant stalks, and even ash from the wood stove found their way back onto the fields. Instead of separating organic matter into a compost system, they practiced what might be called direct recycling. Ash was scattered over wet soil to improve texture and add potassium. Rotten vegetables were dug straight into garden rows. Stalks of grain were cut, dried, and often laid back down on the field as surface mulch. So the field itself became the compost pile, decomposing matter right where it was needed. This constant return of organic material ensured soils never went long without a supply of decaying matter feeding microbes. And, while it lacked the controlled environment of modern composting, the result was the same: humus forming directly in the ground. A central difference between farming 2 centuries ago and gardening today was the daily presence of livestock. Cows, horses, sheep, and chickens weren't just sources of food and labor, they were soil managers. When pastures were rotated, animals grazed intensively for short periods and moved on, leaving behind manure and trampled plant matter that quickly reintegrated into the soil. This created a natural layer of fertility that renewed itself year after year. Manure was rarely stored in large heaps as we might imagine today. Instead, farmers often allowed bedding straw, manure, and spilled feed to just build up in barns and pens. Then they'd spread that mixture directly on their fields before planting. The straw worked as both mulch and a source of organic matter, while the manure provided much-needed nitrogen. These days, gardeners talk about cover crops like clover, rye, or vetch as if there's some kind of specialized technique, but 200 years ago, these plants were simply part of the regular crop rotation. Farmers understood that certain crops rested the soil, bringing back its vigor after a season of heavy feeders like wheat or maize. They might not have talked about nitrogen-fixing bacteria, but they noticed that fields planted with clover or beans just gave better harvests the next year. Instead of bringing in fertility with compost or fertilizer, they actually grew it right there in place. In the absence of plastic sheets or packaged mulch, farmers relied on what nature gave them. Leaves gathered from woodland edges, straw left after threshing grain, and even weeds pulled from ditches were spread across garden beds. These coverings did more than conserve moisture. Another forgotten method was the use of wood ash and charcoal, both abundant byproducts of cooking and heating with firewood. Wood ash was prized for its ability to loosen heavy soils and add potash, essential for strong root crops. Few farmers 200 years ago wasted even the water that washed through their homes or barns. Liquid runoff from animal yards was often collected and spread on fields as liquid manure. Human waste, diluted and aged, was used similarly in some regions. In gardens and kitchen plots, farmers sometimes created fertility by digging trenches, laying in organic matter, and covering it with soil. This in-situ composting didn't produce neat piles, but it accomplished the same end result. Modern gardeners can definitely take inspiration from these forgotten methods. If building and turning a compost pile feels overwhelming, just remember that the field can be the pile. Farmers 2 centuries ago didn't have the luxury of ignoring soil health. Their survival depended on it. Without synthetic fertilizers and without the organized compost piles we rely on today, they managed to keep land productive by recycling everything, layering organic matter directly in place, and allowing nature to carry out decomposition. If you found value in uncovering these forgotten practices, make sure to subscribe to Hydrohaven for more deep dives into soil, composting, and regenerative gardening. Share this with fellow growers who want to learn how the old ways still hold the keys to living, breathing soil today.